are you applying to like, like Google and Opendoor have very different business models,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you understand what that means to the way that like, we
Uh,
operate?
let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the interview process then for BizOps. So let's start with what, and you've alluded to some of this already and talked about it, but let's crystallize it in the form of the interview process. What skills do you need to demonstrate if you're going through BizOps interviews? What are the, top three that you're looking at and trying to assess as an interview?
Yeah, so I'm looking for the ability to think with a process mindset, right? Which often
Okay.
involves breaking down a process operation type question, right? And the nice thing about that type of question relative to a strategy type interview or a strategy consulting type interview is that the shape of the problem oftentimes follows like a linear step, right? Like
Hmm.
many of the biz ops problems that are presented and that I present like follow the we are going to do this thing. What is the order of operations in order to do this thing, right? Like that
Hmm.
that oftentimes is the shape of the case. So I need somebody who can break that down. Now, that's not to say that like we never do market entry type questions. We never do more strategy facing questions. We certainly do, right? But like the absolute critical thing is like, can you think about breaking down a process into its component steps, into the people, the systems, the process itself, and the tools that are used to execute it, and then as we talked about before, right? Like what metrics are you going to use to diagnose where that problem is going on? So that's first and foremost what I want to see, right? I
Yeah.
also want to see as we mentioned before, like a real facility with numbers and with metrics in order to understand like, all right, but what metric would you use to look at this, right? Like how would you actually diagnose it? You know, when I get answers that are, oh, I would look at performance of the sales reps, at the front line. It's like, what does that mean, right? Like
Yeah.
what?
Like that's too vague.
It's too vague, right? Like what does that actually mean? What metrics would you look at? Right. And, the ability to, on the fly, think about, all right, like here are this person's, key results. And here are probably like the three indicators that are going to tell me what's going to drive that to them. And so like, these are, I'm going to take a shot with these.
Yeah.
That is important as well. And then, the final thing, which is, very much unique to biz ops roles at operating companies versus at a services firm is like I do expect you to know my business a little bit,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
Like you took the time to come through a couple rounds of interviews. Like you are now talking to me. Like what research have you done? Have you talked to the people? Do you understand how this business works? Because those are the problems that we're working on, right? Like we're not talking about building widgets, right? We are going to be talking about my business in the case, right? And so you should
Yeah.
understand a bit about how it works or how you think it
Yeah.
works at least.
And then on the third part that you mentioned of like, hey, I want to see that you can demonstrate a little bit of maybe domain expertise is too strong of a word, but knowledge, research, interest in the business you're applying for. Is there a rule of thumb about like how much should I how much should I know? Like, if I've never worked in real estate tech, for example, which I haven't, how
Sure.
much should I know about like how Opendoor Marks works in this market that I'm trying to get into? Like, is
Yeah.
there
I
guidance
mean,
there?
not like not much more than you could glean from reading a few articles and thinking about it, right? Like
Okay.
who who are the company's customers and their key customer segments, right? What do you have any idea of kind of like what the unit economics are of this business? Like what do you think
Hmm.
they are, right?
Yeah.
Is this a super high, contribution margin business, right? Where, the real problem is just CAC, right? Right, or is this a very thin margin business, right, that that really needs to focus on operational excellence. Um, and a lot of that is obvious from the sector that they are in, right? But
Yeah.
like have you like how are you thinking about that, right? Like, you should be thinking about that. Are you applying to, like, you know, like Google and Opendoor have very different business models,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you understand what that means to the way that, like, we
How,
operate?
yeah. Yeah. How does that impact like daily decisions and priorities and
Totally.
where focus gets placed? Yeah, totally.